Our videos on emotional regulation. Today we're still talking about emotional dysregulation. Jeff's going to help us understand the limbic brain's four responses to triggers. So Jeff, you want to tell us what the four limbic brain responses are?
Well, our limbic brains respond to fear really in four ways.
Yeah.
Fight, flight, freeze, or fold.
I'm assuming that's you're either going to get one of the four necessarily. You're not necessarily going to have a combination.
I think they can be smeared
Can.
on occasion. But the limbic brain is always going to be trying to do that thing to make the trigger go away.
All right. So the trigger could be anything, I'm understanding.
Yeah, triggers, when we speak of triggers, we speak of environmental circumstances that in some way trigger this brain to be afraid, to feel fear.
I do think I've heard that it actually could even be a memory or sensation, something that
internal triggers. Yeah, there's internal triggers too.
All right. So let's start with the first one. The first one's fight. Like fight, F-I-G-H-T, fight.
Yep.
Tell me about that. And if you would, give us a parenting, what it looks like as a parent if it's in fight.
Well, my God, Faye, why do you keep asking these questions? Calm it down. Chill out, will you?
So I'm thinking you just gave us an
How's that
example.
an example?
It was. My first response was I wanted to roll my eyes. Like, how dare you?
And that would be the child's response to the same thing because we're sharing limbic brains. The goal of a fight response is, as I said before, is to make that trigger go away by causing the other person or the other thing to feel afraid. Feel basically the same feeling we're feeling, but the goal is that they'll stop whatever they're doing that's causing me to feel afraid. So when I tell you to stop, a lot of times in a fight response, we actually turn our anger on somebody. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but we point it on somebody and we try to tell that person to stop doing the things that's making us feel afraid.
I'm thinking just, in a healthy parenting world, we never want to think of ourselves as being in a fight mode, especially with our kids.
Well, actually, we do, believe it or not.
Yeah.
There are times when fight mode is outstanding. If your child is about to chase a ball out onto a busy street, that's the time to use that attack, that fight mode, and stop it. Stop. Whoa, Jimmy, stop now. You want him to stop now. Okay, so there is these responses from our limbic brain, they have a purpose, even in parenting, but they should basically be limited to safety and destruction of property and those sort of things. They should be the exception in our homes, certainly not the rule.
So it's kind of more of an immediacy, that kind of seeing a snake out there.
Yeah, perfectly good response. When you see a snake, you want that snake to go away. Okay, typically. So you might yell at it, you might throw a stone at it, you might shake a stick at it, but the goal is that the snake or the environmental trigger distance itself from you.
So how will that look for children in a fight response?
Now, children's fight responses can look, there's a multiple ways that all of these can work out, but a typical fight response in a child would look like kicking, hitting, yelling. As they become teenagers, a fight response is the ever-present, "You're a terrible mom. You can't. Jimmy's mom lets him do this. You're just awful. You don't even know how to be a mom." That would be a fight response. It's attempting to make the mom feel afraid and back off of whatever they're giving. Other fight responses in children, again, the typical throwing sand in a sandbox. Anything that comes from a child that's designed to make the thing in front of them stop being in front of them. When you take a toy from a child, from a little child, toddler, oftentimes they'll throw themselves backwards. Their backs will arch and they'll scream as if the entire world is coming to an end. And that too is a fight response because they're shouting their rage at you in order to. Again, their goal is the trigger was getting the toy removed. Their limbic brain goal is to get that trigger removed and to get the toy back.
So what about the power struggles that families get into. Is that part of a fight?
Well, of course, whenever our brains utilize fight, especially when we use them too often, we end up, especially with traumatized children, we end up with the high risk of triggering a fight response in the child, which ends up being a power struggle. So now it's, you need to eat those peas right now. No. Well, you're not going to get any dessert until you eat those peas. Or the one I like is, well, we're not going to leave this table until you eat those peas. And, what is the family going to sit there all night long? Okay? And wait for the child to eat the peas? Typically, we make liars of ourselves when we get in those power struggles because at some point we get up and leave the table.
Yeah, there was a mom in front of me at Goodwill the other day, and her 3-4-year-old child dropped his sippy cup. And she looked at him and said, "You dropped that again, and I'm leaving it." And couldn't will what happened. He goes, "Nope."
Yeah.
And now she's stuck. And,
Right.
and everybody's around her watching her. And she checks out, pushes the cart away, and then she bends over and picks it up. And I just wanted to pull her aside and say, "Don't do that. It's not worth the price of a sippy cup."
One of the hallmarks of the ways that you can see that you're in a fight, flight, or freeze response is a lot of times we don't think about what we do. Mm-hmm. Clearly, she wasn't thinking. Her thinking was that the child wanted to be there at that store just as much as she did, and that wasn't the case. So her limbic brain was responding in a way that didn't get her what she wanted.
There was no cognition of that. It was the limbic brain. So then let's move to the next one, the flight. I'm thinking of a parent like fleeing, but tell me, I'm assuming that we just don't run off to Aruba.
Well, that's very good. At its base, that's what it would be. It would be getting up and leaving, running away. Many of the families we work with over the years have had children who are flight risks. So that's a very clear example of flight. But another way is that it comes out in a parent is this one. You know what? I'm done with this. I'm not dealing with you no more. Go to your room. Your dad can deal with you when you get home. Well, that's mom fleeing from the trigger, which was the interaction she was having with the child. Another response in parenting that you get sometimes that is a flight response is, we're just not going to do this anymore. I'm done. That's it. Okay, now there's a little bit of anger there, so kind of you're mixing fight and flight a little bit. A lot of times, overall, in the grand scheme of things, it can even kind of be a flight thing to schedule things so heavily. If part of you is afraid of being with a child at home, sometimes what we'll do is we'll schedule this shopping trip, and we'll schedule that chore that needs done. We'll schedule a trip to the
gymnastics
Y,
and soccer,
and all of these things. They can be actually flight responses that leave us being able to say we're parenting, but in actuality we're in our back brain and avoiding parenting.
And how many times, particularly, we've seen parents that are doing foster care that are so overbooked. There's just no time, and they'll. Unfortunately, they'll think about all the kids' appointments, but it's really they just don't want to be home.
Exactly,
it's just too difficult.
And in children, the runaway behaviors, the flight behaviors look like disappearing for periods of time, going into their room. But here's another one: I can't. I don't know how to do that. I can't do it. I'm not gonna. I don't want to work on my homework. That's the child trying to say there's a reason I can't confront my trigger.
It just occurred to me, electronics are doing that these days. We are all running from everything.
Absolutely.
With electronics.
Absolutely, and it's way out of hand in most of our homes. And children really can escape all of the things that scare them in the world by disappearing into a video game for long periods of time.
There's a few parents that get sucked into that world too.
Yep.
Or Facebook or Pinterest or any of those other social media pieces.
Electronics are very distracting these days from the business of life. Yeah. Some people would argue they can be part of life, and they can, but we very often use them as a flight response.
So before time gets away from us, how about freeze? What's that look like?
Oh, freeze is sometimes one of the most infuriating ones. in parents, it could easily sound like this. Look, well, I got to look. Let me tell you. I'm trying to explain this to you, but I can't. You need to. And what happens is your brain just freezes up.
Mm-hmm.
You're so upset, fearful, scared, whatever emotion you want to plug in there. You're so much of it that your brain freezes up and it locks up.
That's where you actually lose cognition then.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why we're talking about the limbic brain versus the cognitive brain, the thinking brain. That person is losing cognition.
Freeze also looks like this one. This one is very. This one's tough in a kid. It can look like this.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Mm-hmm.
And what they've done is they've just locked up and gone away.
I'm thinking sometimes babies have learned to do that early on if there's too much stress, and now as a child in a home, then that baby could be going away, freezing, even to the point. Can it be to the point of disassociation then?
Yeah, that would be a freeze response.
Yeah. Then lastly, how about fold?
The fold response. Of course, the one everyone's familiar with is the parent who draws a line in the sand and then backs down. Okay. All right. I'm sick of arguing about this cookie. Just take it. Just take them. Yeah. Take the whole package if you want. I'm done with this. I can't argue. That's a fold. That's making the trigger go away by just giving into what the child is doing.
That's what the mom did at Goodwill the other day. She went into flight or what I'm not going to pick that up, but then she folded at the end and she picked up the cup. And
probably stayed at the store too. In a child, it can very often look like that. They just do what they're told, but they keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. They do what they're told to do, but they never learn not to do it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I worked with a child one time a long time ago that told me he didn't respect his teacher because when the other kids got out of line, the teacher wouldn't yell. He would just stay there and be real calm, and he thought that was a sign of weakness. In fact, as you go out here in the long run, one of the scariest pieces of fold is in girls who are abused sexually early on, and they get the idea that the things that are done to them are good. You'll hear statements like, well, everybody has to learn about this stuff some way. Mine was better than most. It was good that he did these things with me.
That would be really scary. Yeah. Or actually changing kids' brains and redefining experiences in a very negative way.
Yeah. So when these limbic brain responses dominate behavior, the awful thing for us is that those brains are still learning, and they're learning how to handle the world.
So, well, thank you for explaining the 4 limbic responses. Now our families have something to watch for. The 4 different, the fight, the flight, the freeze, and the fold. So next time we're going to be exploring the combination of the limbic brain and the cognitive brain and their interactions. So thank you for watching.